This video is going to be broken up into 4 sections. We're going to cover my marketing mistakes, my legal mistakes, my money mistakes, and general real estate business mistakes. The first marketing mistake is laziness in list stacking. Now, I own Ballpoint Marketing. We've done well north of 40 million pieces of mail for investors like me and yourself. It would technically behoove me to not tell you some of these things because you would spend more money on marketing, but I'm more interested in you getting results than us getting a couple extra bucks. So when it comes to list stacking in your marketing, we want to make sure that you are removing people from your marketing campaigns that simply shouldn't be on there. One of the best ways to get bad reviews as a real estate investor is to not actually take people off your mailing list when they ask you to do so. I've never seen a real estate investor with good Yelp reviews. So if you're setting up like online profiles, maybe just don't set up a Yelp for your We Buy Houses company. It's where people go to complain about their sandwiches and apparently the mail they get. We also want to make sure we're removing things like your return to senders. If you're mailing the same lists consistently, you're going to get mail that comes back as undeliverable. Well, instead of mailing that a second or a third or a fourth time and getting that same mail to bounce back over and over and over again, simply cut it from your marketing campaign and save yourself a small fortune. Another kind of quick pro tip is also removing any of your responders. If somebody's already in system, they've already raised their hand as interested, why would I send them another piece of mail asking if they want to sell their house? That makes it kind of look amateur hour and breaks any feeling of we care about them as a person. It becomes clear they're just on a marketing list. The second mistake that I see is inconsistency in marketing. And early on in my career, I was definitely guilty of this one. You have to market like your business depends on it because it does. New leads, new opportunities is the lifeblood of a real estate investor, flipper, or developer's business. We don't have projects. We don't have revenue. We don't have a way to keep our guys busy. We go under. Even though I am a real estate investor, serving other real estate investors as a service provider has its challenges. My lawn care clients, when it comes to marketing, if they want to double their business, they double their marketing budget. Real estate guys are some of the only folks I know that will do what they've always done and just magically hope this month is going to be better than what they've been averaging. In 2016, I did 6 off-market deals. In 2017, I did 74. And one of the big things that happened was I got super consistent in my marketing. I set the goal of I wanted to do 50 deals a year. Back then, I was sending 2,500 letters to get an off-market deal. There's 52 weeks in a year. So the thought process was, if I simply do 2,500 pieces of mail per week, I will get 1 deal per week, resulting in 52 deals on the year. And I exceeded that number. The cool thing with marketing consistently like that was I actually had to slow down my marketing because I had too many leads and I was dropping balls. And I ended up exceeding the goal that I initially set. One of the things I do on my marketing to help me stay consistent is every single month I log what I sent, who I sent it to, and what my logic was, as well as what I see as potential future campaigns. So for instance, month 1, if I just mail to absentee owners, somebody that owns a house but doesn't live in it, I might take down the note of, hey, these were the zip codes I marketed to. And what I could do next time is market to seniors in that same area. That way, month 2, when I'm trying to remember what did I do, or month 3, when I'm trying to remember what I did in month 1, kind of this change log of all of the decisions I've made and the hypothesis that I'm testing. The next marketing mistake that I used to make all of the time was in my data hygiene. I wouldn't actually look at my lists to see what I was mailing or who it was going to. Something that a lot of folks don't realize is the data that you're getting from like a prop stream or deal machine is coming from county. And counties don't have perfect data. They have a lot of errors and omissions in them. If you've done any direct to seller marketing, pull up one of your lists and just sort by the columns and look at what's missing, blank, or incomplete. You'll see addresses that don't have city or state or zip codes, or even places that are out of country. If you're just sending those to a mail house, chances are you're paying them to fulfill a piece that's never going to make it there. Another thing that I'll do in my data hygiene is I'll remove duplicates. So let's just say that I buy 3 different lists from an online list broker. I buy a list of expired listings, I buy a list of seniors with equity, and I buy a place of folks that have liens on their property. If I take those 3 individual lists and just shoot off a mail campaign, there's going to be overlap. I'm going to have a senior that tried to sell their house and it didn't sell, and they've got liens. Do you realistically think sending one person 3 pieces of mail is going to land you a phone call, let alone a sale from that person? If it doesn't look like you know what you're doing on your marketing, they're not going to trust you to actually buy their place. This is especially true with like an absentee owner list. There are going to be folks on your list that are on your list 20, 30, 40, 50 times. Real estate is a relatively small circle. And if you send one guy 52 postcards in a month, do you think he's going to have good thoughts or nice things to say about you when people ask? Not to mention, we only needed to send one of those. I can think of more fun ways to blow $51. The fourth thing that I see, and this one's honestly heartbreaking, I try to do a really good job of setting proper expectations around this, is underestimating the actual amount of work that it's going to take in order for you to see success. What I'm seeing in all of the markets I'm in is about a 1 to 1.5% cost per acquisition. So if I'm going after $300,000 houses, it's going to cost me somewhere between like $3K and $4,500 to get a deal on average. There are outliers. Sometimes it's way more and sometimes it's way less, but that's about what I'm seeing. If you're a real estate investor in San Diego and you're going after $1 million places, my experience tells me it's going to take you between 10 to 15 months on average of spending $1,000 per month to get a deal. I don't know about you, but I'm simply not that patient. If you're seeing substantially higher cost per acquisitions, we've got to look at your marketing, your creative, your copy, as well as how you're working your leads, which I'll get to here in a minute. Something that I learned early on from one of my business coaches was what the actual cash conversion cycle is in real estate. Typically, it's about 60 to 90 days if you're a real estate agent or if you're doing something like wholesaling, meaning money goes out and listings or contracts come back in. If you're doing flips or wholesales or rentals, that might be substantially longer, 6 to 12 to even 18 months. In my personal business, we're averaging about one deal for every 11 to 14 raw leads that comes in. That includes the take me off the list. So just kind of proper expectations. Earlier this year on the channel, we transparently shared some cold call testing that we were doing. The problem was it took us 54 leads to get one deal, literally 4 times the amount of work and lead follow-up to get a conversion. And our cost wasn't 4 times cheaper. It was still about $3,000. So we had to just decide, do I want to work 4 times as hard for the same cost per acquisition, or would I rather just do more mail? The final thing I want to hit on the marketing mistakes is working your leads. Guys, this is the least sexy part of this entire business. Less fun than the marketing, the remodels. I would rather manage contractors than work leads. There's nothing more uninspiring than calling somebody that you've already called 42 times to see if they'll pick up the 43rd time. I've shared case studies on this YouTube channel of like, hey, we called this guy 43 times to get a deal. That sounds like, wow, they really worked their leads, but it's not fun. It's not pleasurable. If you're using something like Resimpli to work your leads, one of the rules that I have is every single lead needs to either have a drip sequence running or an open task. You're not going to remember what you did or what you were supposed to do with person number 37 when you've got 100 plus leads in your system. I have worked with some giant brand names like TV star folks, and without fail, most investors struggle in this part of the business. So if you have leads that you haven't been working, A, there's gold right there. And B, you're not alone. This is a pretty common pitfall in the business. I shot a YouTube video where I talk about auditing the CRMs of a bunch of investors and what I found wrong. I think it's one of the most actionable videos we've ever put out, and I'll be sure to link to that on today's video. Up next, we've got some of my legal mistakes. This is not fun to share. Some of these are embarrassing, and most of these cost me quite a bit of money, but my goal is maybe you'll see one of these before you do one of the dumb things that young Ryan did. The first and most common thing that I see is like playing attorney. I'm going to give you a real world example of this that cost me about $30,000. An actual like cash that had to go from my account to somebody else's. Early on in my career, this probably would have been back in 2016, 17. I met somebody on Bigger Pockets that was interested in funding a project for me. They didn't have a ton of budget, and we got a great deal on a place that happened to be in a pretty like hoodie area of Indianapolis. For reference, we were all into this deal for right at about 40 grand. Now, instead of doing the right thing and finding an attorney to draft up like JV agreements, Ryan opened Word and tried to write in his best legalese. So I drafted up this nice JV agreement about roles, expectations, P&L, how profits would be handled, losses would be handled, who was responsible for what. He signed it over, they signed, and we're good to go. The day of closing comes up and they get a little bit nervous and they say, hey, we'd feel a little bit better if we closed in our name instead of yours. Is that all right? Sure. Why not? After all, you guys have the money and I just have the deal. So fast forward, we buy the deal in their name. We complete the remodel. We're under contract, ready to sell the property, and it's supposed to close the following day. That night, somebody decided to Molotov cocktail the house. It was a vacant in a rough part of town. They never caught the person who did it. It made the news. The property was a total loss. So I do what anybody would do. Let me call my insurance agent and start the process of making a claim, but we're going to be okay. Thankfully, nobody got hurt. The insurance company was very quick to let me know that I had insurance in my name on a property that I didn't own. Due to the last minute switcheroo, I didn't put them on the insurance. I had them listed as additionally insured, but I had it as it was a property that I owned, which was an unfortunate technicality. So I send the insurance company my JV agreement that I typed up in Word myself, and lo and behold, they didn't find that it was legally binding. So they came back and said, look, we think you might have a claim here. The loss is $40,000 is what we're willing to pay. However, we're only going to throw you 10. If you want to get the other 30, you have to retain New York legal counsel to sue us at New York rates. Maybe you win, maybe you get nothing. What would you like to do? To young broke me, losing $30,000 sounded better than losing $40,000. I knew I didn't really have a leg to stand on because I literally didn't own the house, so I took the check. Unfortunately for me, the profits from my next deal or two went totally to them in order to make them whole. Technically, on my JV agreement, we could have split that loss 50-50, but ultimately, it was my bad. Insurance was my responsibility. I dropped the ball. Legally, I could have been sucks to be you guys, 15-15, but I did make them whole. The second legal mistake I made is what I'm going to call loose compensation agreements or handshake deals among folks at RIAs. I've been in this direct to seller marketing space for more than 10 years. And early on, I kind of got known for having a knack for it. So I would have people approach me with, hey, if you can find a deal like this, we'd love to bring you in on it. Early on in my career, I helped source a development opportunity for some guys on the West Coast. And the general assumption was that I would be brought in as an equity owner on this big project, which is very exciting to, young 20-year-old Ryan. However, they got the deal and I never saw a dollar because I didn't have anything in writing. A couple years later, they did reach out because they were getting audited and needed my help explaining some of their marketing expenses. And it was a little satisfying to be of no help whatsoever. I never want to gloat in someone's downfall, but the third legal mistake that I want to point out is attention to detail, particularly if you're starting to do any sort of volume. If you ever get to the point that employees have a stamp with your signature on it, you want to be very, very careful on who's signing off on what and what exactly you're agreeing to. I can think of two distinct examples. One I did a YouTube video on. We had a seller that we had gotten a retrade on, and that paperwork didn't make it over to title, and we didn't catch it until after the deal had already closed. We paid them 10 grand more than we were supposed to, and they didn't say anything. Big shocker there. The second big one I had was in inspection responses with a buyer. There was a deal where it was nightmare buyer. They wanted all kinds of crazy stuff done, and we were supposed to say no to certain items that we actually said yes to. It ended up being $8 grand worth of work that we had zero intention of doing. I said we didn't want to do, but I wasn't careful in reading the DocuSign. I just kind of clicked through and hit finish, which resulted in me getting to do $8 grand worth of work that I wasn't wanting to do. In shooting videos like this, I kind of feel a little bit like a loser. How have I made this many mistakes? But if I'm just super honest, my personality type really is not very detail oriented or type A, and more of your creative type. And it's something I have to intentionally learn expensive lessons like this off of in order to correct. My fourth legal mistake is probably more of like a character flaw that I had to get over. That was kind of like being a nice guy, meaning if I treat people well, if I'm honest, if I do the right thing, then people will like me, love me, and do business with me, and my life will be easy. And while that's a nice fantasy, that's not how the real world works. One of my rules with off-market properties is I will never force an owner-occupant out of their home. You're never going to see Ryan on the 5 o'clock news of real estate investor kicks grandma out of the house she raised her children in. I'm just never going to be the guy to do it. What that looks like is if I'm under contract with a seller and they want out, meaning they don't want to deal with me anymore, they want to move out and they live there, I'm inclined to let them do so. Now, if they don't live in the home, it's a rental for them or it's vacant, I'm going to force them to honor the terms of the legally binding contract that they willingly entered into with me. I'm going to hold their feet to the fire, not just let them walk, but I'm not going to do that to grandma. Early on in my career, I had a sweet little old lady that we were under contract to buy her house. Day of closing, she calls me just bawling her eyes out. I raised my kids here. I can't sell. Please don't make me. Please just let me out. I'm so sorry. I'm going to die in this home. Don't take it from me. Right? Like SpongeBob, like a little violin. Me being the nice guy that I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to force you to close. Sucks to suck. Right? Well, fast forward, she turns around and sells it to another investor for like $500 or $1,000 more. So what I'll do now is leave a notarized, recorded copy of our purchase and sale agreement out in order to cloud title. Hey, you don't want to sell, you're going to die in that home. That's totally fine. But guess what? If you change your mind, you're going to have to talk to me about it. One thing that's super important just to point out, if you're using like NOIs, notice of interests, recorded purchase and sale agreements, anything to cloud title, if you back out, you had better pull that sucker off. Otherwise, you can be sued for fraudulently clouding title. There's kind of this like ghetto sketchy investor thing that I see going on where people are offering stupid prices, leaving an NOI out, hoping that somebody will come and pay them off when they had no intention of closing. I don't know who's teaching this BS, but whoever you are, there's probably a special place in hell for you. The fifth mistake, and I don't think this is done intentionally, but it's forgetting to send over the EMD or earnest money deposit. I don't do this. This is one that I can't say I've made the mistake of, but I have benefited from you guys forgetting to do it. In most instances, a purchase and sale agreement is not binding unless valuable consideration has been provided, meaning an EMD or earnest money deposit. Could be cash paid directly to the seller or sent to the title company held in escrow. But if your agreement says you'll send over EMD within 3 or 4 days and it's not there, your agreement might be null and void. In fact, when a seller calls me and says, I'm under a contract with Sketchy Wholesaler 123 LLC, they're dragging me along and not closing, first thing I ask is, did they put down EMD? Time to talk about the money. I am guilty in the past with staff of abdicating, not delegating. Let me explain what that means. In the past, I would hire somebody and I would say, you're going to do job X. I would then no longer check in on that. There wouldn't be key deliverables. There wouldn't be much accountability. It would just be like, I hired you to do the thing. I'm paying you. So of course you're doing the thing, right? That is not delegating. Delegating is, I need you to do X. It's got to be done in Y time frame. Z is the deliverable, and this is what the accountability will look like. It would be like hiring somebody to work your leads and just assuming it's done versus checking to see, do they have an open task on all of those leads? Or do they have some sort of a drip running? Or have they dropped the ball? The amount of money that I've lost in just abdicating, just kind of, hey, do it without any sort of follow through or checking in or accountability is probably embarrassingly large. The second mistake here is overpaying for capital. Early on in my career, I wasn't really like borrowing money. I was more partnering. But when I actually did the math, I was paying the gentleman about a 30% APR. That's a lot. That's pretty high. Now, when I've actually been borrowing at a rate, I've typically been using private money and I'm paying about 8% interest plus 1 point. It's not as cheap as bank capital, but it's nowhere near the hard money costs that a lot of investors are paying of like 10 and 2. Spoiler alert, you'll make way more money if you can get the cheapest source of capital possible, which is going to be a local community bank. Actually add up what you're paying in points, fees, appraisals, all of the hard money costs versus what cheaper debt would be, you'll realize that you could probably make about 30 to 40% more money without doing another deal just by getting a better deal. I was at a buddy's birthday party and met one of the house flipping reality TV stars in Indianapolis. And we got to talking about her projects. And one of the questions I asked was, what are you paying for money? She was doing just these massive remodels. I mean, like 6-figure plus projects. And as we got to talking, her money came from a very well-known source that sounds very like, oh, wow, you work with them. But she was paying north of 20% APR for that privilege. I don't care if you get to say that Bill Gates is funding your deals. If it's costing you 20% plus on an annual basis, you're out of your mind. The third mistake that I see when it comes to money, and I'm guilty of this, and so are tons of people that I've worked with, and that is underpaying staff. I often see real estate investors start to go direct to seller and they think, man, it'd be great to just outsource this whole acquisitions thing. There's almost this fantasy of sitting on the beach while deals get done. Now, it can be a reality. I have the cool stories of I was on this trip and we did these deals, but it's typically not where you're going to be in your first 6 to 12 months. I've watched more investors than I can count try to pay somebody $2,000 a month in a base pay with a large commission structure and try to land a killer salesperson. The problem though is they don't do nearly enough marketing to keep that person busy. If you land a shark, you've got to keep it fed. Otherwise, it's going to eat you, or it's going to go somewhere else. On the whole eating you note, there's a comical trend I've seen of acquisitions managers for investors joining CCF to learn how to replace their boss. The next thing that I want to touch on is the pro forma versus a pro Fakeas. So a pro forma is basically our assumptions of a project and how it will go. The old saying though is it's really a pro Fakeas because the numbers aren't actually real, and that's often not how it pans out. I've heard it said that real estate investors love to lie to themselves and then not look at the actuals. We'll look at, hey, I'm buying a house for $100K. I'm putting $25K into it and I'm going to sell it for $200. So therefore I'm making $75,000. But that's simply not the case. Let's say that I'm doing a $10,000 wholesale deal. But if I'm paying an acquisitions manager 10% because, well, I'm underpaying them, I'm down to $9K. I then take into account my $2 to $3K in marketing. I'm down to $6 or $7K. I then take out my costs like Resimpli, PropStream. I'm down closer to $5. Most investors will tell you, yeah, I did a $10K wholesale deal, and you'll assume, and they'll assume in their head, I made 10 grand, but that's not what the bank account shows. The fifth mistake is something that I've actually addressed here on YouTube before, and that is expense or software creep. What are you paying for, and is it generating an ROI for you or not? Oftentimes, I feel like we'll see ads for new tools, new vendors, new AI software, but if it's not generating a return in the business, we've got to cut it. I believe that we're accountable for being good stewards of the resources that we've been entrusted to. Can I honestly say, yeah, I used that $1 to the absolute best of my ability, or did I squander it? As a real estate entrepreneur, it's really easy to get auto build to death of this software here, that PPL vendor there, that PPC manager there. If it's not generating an ROI though, you've got to know when to cut or kill it. One exception to that, I would argue, is any of your brand resources. So if you set up a website and you drop mail that has that website on there, you'd better plan on having that active for the foreseeable future. Very often I have sellers get a piece of mail and sit on it for months or even years. The last thing you want to have happen is turn your brand off and miss out on those opportunities. So if you're struggling, I would look at your credit card statements and I would just be super honest. What can I cut or kill? What do I need to put on pause? You might even consider not having tools on auto pay, but doing it on more of an invoice. Now we're going to talk about some of the more fun and comical business mistakes. The first one I've got is what I'm going to call homie hopping. You're bouncing from one course, one product, one shiny object to the next without ever getting any traction, because the dopamine hits feel good of, oh, I'm now in that person's circle, but you can't pay your bills with dopamine. Anytime I'm talking to somebody that's interested in working with me and they mention oh yeah, I've been in that program, or I've taken that course, or I'm in that group, it just immediately throws up a red flag for me. Okay, why did none of that work for you? Now, there are totally charlatans out there just selling BS that doesn't work, which maybe that's your problem, but I like to think that you're not dumb. What it probably is you get into it thinking it's magical and realize it's actually hard work. The second business mistake I see, and this one actually kind of breaks my heart, is folks quitting 3 feet from gold. Kind of touched on this with shutting off tools that you're not using, but I've seen this even with folks that I've worked with. They get a little bit of traction, they decide to do something else, they turn off their tracking phone numbers, they close down their website, and they're out of business when people are looking to work with them. In Sold Fast, we're starting to get some pretty solid SEO traction, and we've got some like state level pages that are ranking. So occasionally I'm getting leads in markets that I'm not even in just through organic SEO. So what I'll always do is look through my Rolodex of everybody I know in those markets. And there are several times that I go and click on somebody's website and error, it's no longer up. Or on their Google My Business, it's been permanently closed. Literally was bringing them a lay down opportunity and they're no longer around. This is one of the reasons that I'm actually pretty selective of who I'll work with. If somebody just wants to dabble or try this, I don't recommend that they do that. The folks that I want to serve are folks that are living in their market, they're local, and they're trying to build something cool. The third one that I've got is losing vision. This is probably one of the more dangerous ones, and I have found myself in this spot. I'm going to preach at you for a second. If you're not a person of faith, call it the universe or whatever you need to do to feel good. But there's a verse in the Bible that says that where there is no vision, the people perish. And I have been in that spot of not having vision, but I've had money, I've had status, I've had all the toys I wanted, and still feeling very empty and very hollow. You've got to know where you're going and why and what it is that you actually want to build. There's this really dangerous thing that can happen when you get what you want, and that could be possessions, that could be assets, that could be a certain level of freedom. But if you don't keep in mind where you're wanting to go or the why behind it, that gets pretty gnarly. It gets even more dangerous if you're not doing well financially. If you don't have vision and you don't have money and debt is stacking up, I think that's when we see people do things they can't undo, like hurt themselves or have affairs. The fourth thing that I want to throw up is don't be afraid to be the dumb guy. That's why I did 4 like this. You're never going to know everything. You might think that you know how it all works, but I promise you, there are innovations, there are improvements, there are areas that you can learn and grow in. One thing I would challenge you is to look at, what do I least understand in the business? Is it marketing? Is it the acquisition side? Is it sales? Is it how you talk to people? For me, a huge gap is the construction side. I didn't grow up in the trades. It took me a lot to even be able to be like, is that done right? Or not. A lot of trial and error, right? It could be the accounting. It could be how you raise capital, or it could be what you do with the money once you've made it to ensure that you keep it and don't just blow it. If you have like a giant ego on you, you're probably going to go broke. I don't think current me would get along with 21 or 22-year-old me that thought he was like God's gift to real estate. I've lost some money. I've learned some painful lessons, and I'm just glad to be in a position that I'm still here, I'm still kicking, and I'm still learning and growing. The fifth thing, and this is something that me, a kid from the Midwest, really struggled with, is being afraid of that no. How I grew up, no meant no. It wasn't ask me again. It wasn't ask me in front of your friends. It was final answer. One of the big things that changed in that year from 6 to 74 deals was I started to push a little bit more. Jen Sincero has a book. It's called You're a Badass at Making Money. It's a little bit more like woo than I typically go or like, but one of the takeaways she had in there was just see what you can get away with. And that was something I started to do with sellers. I'd make them an offer. They'd tell me no. In the past, it was like, oh, okay, let me tuck my tail behind my legs and just like, leave. What it then turned into was, interesting. Did you have a counter in mind? Okay. Has anybody offered you that kind of money? Oh, the neighbor's house went for more. Okay. What kind of shape was the neighbor's house in? Not being afraid to push a little bit more. Something else I'll do if somebody asks something that's very clear they're trying to get a better deal, but they're not being straight with it. Like they might say, do you have any flexibility there? Instead of being like, oh yeah, I could pay more. Be like, what do you mean by that? Instead of looking at the no or just shutting down on it, I would look at, okay, how can I make this work? Where is my angle? What is the option here? This isn't even just with sellers. This is like with yourself. Early on in my business, it was like, man, I need to hire somebody to do X. Instead of saying, well, I can't afford that and just turning my brain off, it's okay, how can I afford that? What milestones do I need to hit in order to make that a no-brainer? If I was going to walk you through all of the lessons I've learned, it would probably be like a 48-hour long video or like a dictionary level thick. If you're a real estate investor that's doing flips or buy and hold and you're interested in this kind of help, we run a real estate franchise called Sold Fast, and I'd be interested in exploring A, if your market's open, and B, if it makes sense for us to do business together. You've got to done at least 5 deals. You have to have at least 50K liquid, and one of them has to have been a full-on remodel that you've completed to make sure you can handle the kind of projects that we're going to find for you. For those of you guys that made it this far, I want to congratulate you on investing your time in actionable content that's going to help you avoid common pitfalls that I've watched bankrupt more people than I can count. They've even maybe pushed me a little closer to the edge than I've wanted to be at times. If we haven't met yet, my name's Ryan Dossey. Any questions you have, just throw those in the comments and I'll personally respond to you. There's not some agency or VA doing that. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video. That helps us get in front of more cool people like you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't, and talk to y'all next time.